Picture the inside of a long-haul flight, the quiet thrum of engines settling into a steady heartbeat. You can almost feel the hush that falls over a cabin once the doors are closed and the world outside shrinks to clouds and sky. In the aisle, a man with calm eyes and a modest jacket places a small bag in the overhead bin, thanks the person who steps aside and takes his seat. He looks like any traveler who has learned to move lightly and speak softly. What no one around him realizes is that he is one of the most talked about leaders on the African continent. His name is Ibrahim Traoré. Before this flight touches down, he will be underestimated, challenged, and finally recognized in a way that forces everyone to confront a simple idea: true power rarely needs to announce itself. The plane is still boarding when a flight attendant stops beside his row. She is focused, a little harried, the way you get when the clock and the aisle are against you. She glances at his carry-on and says in a clipped tone that the bag needs to be moved to a different compartment. He nods and reaches up to adjust it, but he moves with the deliberate care of someone who travels often and takes nothing for granted. The attendant checks her watch, then huffs. Her voice carries a hint of impatience as she says that he needs to hurry, that other passengers are waiting, that there are rules and this is not a private jet. A few people in nearby seats glance up. The man says only, "Of course. My apologies." He finishes the adjustment, sits down, and buckles in. The attendant strides away, not unkind but certainly unimpressed. Moments later she is back, scanning boarding passes. When she arrives at his row she asks for his document again, as if she does not recall having checked him before. He offers it without complaint. She looks at his name with no flicker of recognition. He looks out the window, mindful, thoughtful. She returns the pass with a quick nod and moves on. It is a small encounter, the kind you forget by the time the plane takes off. But this one will echo. The safety demonstration rolls through the aisle. The plane begins its pushback. The cabin lights dim and the runway rushes up to meet the wheels. There is that weightless moment between ground and sky when time seems to hold its breath. The seats tilt, the city slips beneath the clouds, and the world narrows to a silver fuselage and 1,000 small human dramas. Somewhere behind a curtain a meal cart rattles. A child asks a question in a stage whisper. A business traveler taps a message that will not send until the plane climbs another few thousand feet. In that suspended world, the man in the modest jacket closes his eyes and listens. The first service begins. The same attendant returns with a tray. She offers choices briskly. When he politely asks a question about the ingredients, she answers in a way that sounds final, the way someone answers when they need the conversation to end. He says thank you and accepts the tray without protest. The traveler in the next seat, who has been watching the exchange with idle curiosity, leans over and asks the man where he is headed. The man smiles and says he is traveling for meetings, then turns the question back. The seatmate mentions the city, the weather, the grind. It is a casual exchange, but something about the traveler's patience and soft voice leaves a quiet impression. Hours pass in the sea of clouds. The cabin cycles through light and dim, meal service and quiet, the slow choreography of long-haul flight. The attendant works with crisp efficiency, but a pattern emerges. With some passengers she is warm, with others brusque. With the man in the modest jacket, she is professional to a fault, but a shade cooler than necessary, as if she has placed him in an internal category and left him there. Almost no one notices, and yet the small choices we make become a story in the minds of others. Turbulence arrives like a distant drumbeat, then grows. A few overhead bins tremble. The crew's voices take on that calm cadence that signals experience. The seatbelt sign chimes. The plane bumps and levels, bumps again and steadies. In the middle of it, a glass tips on a cart and shatters in the galley with a bright, unforgiving sound. The attendant freezes for a second, then moves to clean it, frowning at lost time. The man in the modest jacket stands only enough to help the elderly passenger across the aisle secure a loose item that threatened to roll. He returns to his seat with a small nod. No one thanks him aloud, but the man he helped relaxes, shoulders untensing as the plane finds smoother air. The hours stretch. The cabin sinks into the deep night that flights carry across time zones. In that hush, another attendant, a colleague with a softer touch, recognizes the traveler. It is not the name on the manifest that jogs her memory but the face she has seen in news clips and photographs. She murmurs to a supervisor. Eyes widen. There is a short, quiet conversation behind the service curtain. It is not panic or fear, rather the sudden realization that they have been hosting a head of state without knowing it. Someone whispers, "Are we supposed to do something different?" The supervisor replies, "We are supposed to do what we always do. Treat people well. Keep them safe." The colleague approaches the man and says, "Sir, I hope your flight has been comfortable. If there is anything special you need, please let us know." Her voice carries the gravity of recognition without spectacle. The man smiles with genuine warmth and says, "You have all been working hard. Thank you for the care you show every passenger." The colleague nods, relieved. The original attendant watches this from a few rows away, confusion knitting her brow. She walks over during a quiet moment and speaks to the colleague in a low voice. "Who is he?" The colleague answers softly. The attendant blinks, looks back at the man, and then at the passengers who never suspected that a president was seated among them in coach or business or whatever class this airline uses to separate space. Her face changes, not to flattery, but to reflection. She replays their earlier exchanges in her mind, the hurried tone, the impatient glance, the assumption that someone who moves quietly must therefore be unimportant. A little later, the supervisor chooses a careful moment to greet the traveler. He thanks him for flying with them. The man replies that he prefers to travel as any other person when possible. He says that it helps him see the world as it is, not as people perform it around him. The supervisor acknowledges this with respect and retires. The attendant who had been brusque gathers herself and approaches. Her voice is measured now, more human. "Sir, I want to make sure you are comfortable. Please let me know if there is anything I can do for you." He looks at her, not unkindly, and says, "Thank you. I am fine." Her shoulders drop a fraction in relief, but she does not leave. She says something that matters. She says, "I realize I may not have been as patient earlier. I am sorry." He nods once. "We all have long days. You keep people safe up here. That is not a small thing." The plane crosses an ocean of darkness into the pale light of morning. Breakfast appears like a promise. People stir, stretch, check maps. The world below begins to take shape. A baby laughs for no reason at all, and the sound resets the mood of a row. The attendant, now changed by a quiet revelation, notices details she had skimmed before. The way the traveler carefully thanks her each time, the way he helps the older gentleman with the stubborn lid of a yogurt cup, the way he pauses to consider his words before speaking. She notices the luxury that comes from humility, a luxury that cannot be purchased. As the plane begins its descent, there is a minor issue near the back of the cabin. A nervous passenger, on edge from a fear of landing, stands at the wrong moment. The attendant moves quickly and asks him to return to his seat. He bristles, misreading her urgency. Voices rise. For a heartbeat, things tilt toward confrontation. Then the man in the modest jacket stands just enough to be seen, and in a calm voice he says across the aisle, "My friend, we are almost there. Please help the crew keep us safe." The nervous passenger hears the tone more than the words and sits. The moment dissipates as quickly as it gathered. The attendant meets the traveler's eyes, gratitude bright and unguarded. The descent continues. Touchdown arrives with that soft, satisfying thud that feels like an exhale. The cabin fills with rustling coats, impatient hands reaching for phones that still have nothing to say until the plane clears the runway. The attendant makes the usual announcements, then adds a note of thanks, a touch warmer than before. When the doors finally open and the world floods back in, a few officials step onto the jet bridge with the quiet choreography of professional security. There is no spectacle, just a subtle shift in posture and glance that seasoned travelers recognize. The man in the modest jacket stands, waits, and then exits with the flow, as if he were exactly what he appears to be, another passenger stepping back into the day. The attendant waits near the galley. When the aisle clears, she approaches him one last time. She does not flatter. She does not perform. She simply says, "I hope you had a good flight. I learned something today." He nods, and replies, "So did I." People remember how you make them feel. She holds his gaze for a second, then steps aside to help a family maneuver a stroller. The moment is over, and yet it leaves something behind, like a contrail that stays in the sky long after the plane has moved on. Later, as the crew waits for a shuttle, the attendant turns over the day in her mind. She thinks about the temptation to decide who matters based on what they display. She thinks about how easily a uniform and a clipboard can become a shield, and how often a quiet person can be underestimated. She promises herself something small but important. The next time someone moves slowly to adjust a bag, the next time a face does not ring a bell, she will choose patience first. Not because someone might be famous, but because dignity should not be rationed by recognition. Now imagine the other side of that story, the view from the seat beside the window. The leader reflects on the flight as the motorcade rolls through morning traffic. He thinks about the many times he has watched people decide who he was before a word was spoken. He considers the fragile equation leaders live with, where every gesture is interpreted and every silence is read like a speech. He recalls the attendant's apology, and he smiles. Power is not loud. It is not a raised voice or a special privilege. It is the choice to meet impatience with patience, to turn a small slight into a lesson that helps everyone land a little more gently. And you, listening now, can carry this story into your own daily flights, even if you never leave the ground. In offices and classrooms, in lines at stores and conversations at doors, the question hangs above each encounter like a seatbelt sign. Will you decide who matters by what they show you, or will you choose to offer the same respect to the person who looks ordinary and to the one who commands a room? Will you wait for a title to treat someone kindly, or will you lead with kindness and let the title catch up? The lesson is not about a single airline or a single attendant. It is about the reflex to rank people in our minds. It is about the way assumptions close doors. It is about the rare grace of the person who does not need to be recognized to be respectful, and the rarer grace of the person who admits they misjudged someone and chooses better the next time. Before we close, consider the broader context that often gets lost at cruising altitude. Leaders from African nations travel constantly and, like leaders everywhere, they are watched and weighed through the lens of global narratives. Too often those narratives flatten complexity. They ignore the realities of governing, the pressures of security, the hopes and frustrations of citizens, and the long arc of history shaping a region at the center of crucial debates about resources, sovereignty, and dignity. When a leader chooses to travel quietly, it may be security. It may be preference. It may be a philosophy, to see people without the distortion of ceremony. Whatever the reason, the responsibility on the rest of us remains the same. Recognize the humanity first. If this story made you rethink how power really looks, then carry that insight into your next encounter. Watch what changes when you offer patience before judgment. Notice how different a room feels when respect arrives without conditions. The next time you find yourself in a narrow aisle, literal or otherwise, remember that the most important thing you can move is not a bag overhead but an assumption out of the way. As you reflect, I have a few questions for you to explore in the comments. When have you underestimated someone because they did not fit your picture of importance, and what opened your eyes? If you work in a service role, how do you balance rules and empathy when time is tight and stakes are high? If you are a leader, formal or informal, how do you practice humility in public spaces where people watch your every move? What would it look like for you to build a personal habit of dignifying strangers before you know anything about them? If you found value here, I would be grateful if you join this community by subscribing to the channel. Your support helps bring more nuanced stories to audiences who deserve better than noise. If this episode earned your like, tap that now, and share it with someone who would appreciate a reminder that respect travels well. Most of all, add your voice below. Tell me what stood out. Challenge the idea if you disagree. Offer your own story if you have one. This space grows stronger when thoughtful people speak up with care. As we sign off, hold on to the image of that cabin turning from night to morning, the moment when the clouds thin and the ground appears. That is what understanding feels like. At first you are surrounded by uncertainty. Then a shape emerges. Then detail. Then the runway. The wheels touch, and what felt abstract turns real. May your next landing, and your next conversation, carry that same quiet relief.